children in our state.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Nolan, and to my colleagues for their comments. And I would start by absolutely agreeing that we have an opportunity to do some wonderful things for kids all across the state of New York. And I should also add that the governor deserves credit for the amount of money that he put on the table. We don't agree with the entire allocation or the distribution of that funding, but in reality, if we followed the law that we enacted last year, frankly, there would have been less money on the table. So there was recognition on the part of the executive of the difficulties schools are having, and when he opened the door with $889 million, that's an excellent starting point. At the same time, following up a little bit on what Assemblywoman Lifton said, I think people need to recognize, as much as they don't necessarily want to hear it, that we don't have an unlimited supply of money. So I always tell people that the education part of the budget is the single largest area of growth. And while other parts of the budget are getting cuts, education is getting more money. Maybe less than people want, but certainly there's a lot of money on the table. And the approach that we take, I think, is consistent with what we've heard from our members in their districts. The single largest complaint that we've heard is what Senator Seward talked about, and that's the gap elimination adjustment. We work closely with the Assembly. We take a different approach. We basically double the restoration of the GEA from what the governor proposed, adding about $300 million more. And we think that the primary obligation should be to reduce and further eliminate the GEA before we go back to reopening foundation aid. And I'm sure we can work that out because we did that last year. One area of the budget that's very unique, particularly in light of the fact that it is the only true cut in education, is high tax aid. High tax aid, most people think, is a downstate phenomenon, and that is true to an extent, but that's a real cut. That's a $50 million cut. It's not a smaller increase. If you look at the GEA, everybody got a little bit more, and some got more than others. But high tax aid is problematic. It affects about 40 counties. It affects Democrats and Republicans, Assembly members and senators. And there are districts who took up to 70% cuts in their high tax aid. So we think that is critically important as a fundamental precept that before we talk about adding back money, we have to cover a cut that was put on the table. So the Senate makes full restoration of that. We add $4 million to libraries, which I think makes everybody in the room happy. In terms of non-public schools, we add about $16 million more. And as part of how we get to where we would like to end up, and consistent to some extent with the Assembly, we reorient some of the governor's money. The $203 million, we move around some of the competitive grants, and I think that helps cover the cost of the things that we're talking about. But if you look, and it's a good opportunity, really, and I will take the liberty of speaking for the Assemblywoman, the people behind us, we get to stand here, we get to sit and opine on things, and in large part because they have gotten no sleep and will get no sleep prospectively for at least the next week. So we are fortunate and blessed to have good staff that buck us up and make us look good and work very hard on our behalf. And when we are looking at these proposals, while we haven't announced this yet, there are a number of areas of agreement. You know, building aid, getting rid of the governor's proposal on building aid, data freezes. We don't think those are good ideas. So there's probably at least 25 to 30 areas of agreement without a formal announcement that shows that we're in working well with the governor. Great. If it's a three-way agreement, that sort of takes that stuff off the table. But, you know, we will have conversations about teacher centers and things like that. And fortunately, I know Senator Lanza has been very outspoken about making sure that we advocated for additional funding in teacher centers in our One House proposal. And last but by no means least, looking at the 853s, the special acts, the 4201s, I keep saying this, and I'll close on this point. I actually believe that how we deal with these schools is more of a reflection of who we are as a government and how we educate kids in this state. And these schools, in large respect, have not had an increase in 4 years. They're hanging on by a thread. They operate on a 2-year lag. And we believe that it is time to put more money into these schools so that these children get the education they deserve. And frankly, while today is not the forum, I believe we have to take a step forward and look at some fundamental reform in this entire area, because people who work in this area and legislatively and in DOB and SED, nobody thinks it's working. And we're going to have to take that up as a post-budget issue, but that is extraordinarily important for the efforts of these schools, that we find some ways to make their lives better and make things a little bit easier. And I want to thank Assemblywoman Nolan and her colleagues from the Assembly for the work to date and where we're going to go between now and St. Patrick's Day and the 21st of March.